Hello everyone, and welcome to The Secret. I'm Nadir Talibzadeh. One of the chapters of Iranian and indeed world history is the 8-year Iraqi imposed war on Iran during the 1980s. The main theme that defined the whole war was the concept of the sacred defense, which took on different forms both on the front line, where Iranian soldiers were defending their borders with utmost courage, and on the home front, where families received the bodies of their heroes and helped the soldiers through different means. Also, during this period, many Iranians who went to war were captured by the Iraqi side and were sent to squalid camps where they would be tortured by the Iraqi captors. In this episode of The Secret, I'll be talking to Mehdi Jafari, the director of the film called 23 People, which portrays the bravery and heroism of 23 teenage boys who became prisoners of the Iraq-Iran war. The selflessness of these youths for the country has been the reason for a number of authors and filmmakers to develop projects about them.
Is war the right place for children like you?
قبول داری که جنگ جای بچه‌های کوچیکی مثل شما نیست؟
هم گفتن جنگ جا بچه ها نیست باستن تا بزرگ شن کی میدونه آدم کی بزرگ میشه
چرا میزنی؟
چی؟ نه واقعا چونه میزنی الدن؟ ساکت! يلا حركوا
أخذ معكم صورة الكريم
باش ماها امیدوارم که یه عکسی یادگاری بگیرد.
تعالوا يمينا.
بفرمایید. بلند شید.
ما دیگه نمیخوایم اینجا بمونیم.
متاسف که میشنوم اسیر جنگی نباید بیشتر از چند روز زندان باشه. امیدوارم هر چه زودتر برگشتی کشور شما و آزاد بشی.
Mr. Mehdi Jafari, welcome to the program. Thank you so much. You made a documentary first about the story. It took you a few years and it was shown on television. And then after that, you started a dramatic story. You filmed and produced a dramatic story. Tell me about how you came upon this idea to do a story about these POWs that was first written in a novel, in a book, and then in a documentary which you directed, and then finally the successful film that was shown recently at Fajr Film Festival.
That's right. The story of the film began in 2005 when I was offered by Channel 4 of the IRIB to make a documentary on the subject. From the very beginning, the subject was very peculiar and appealing to me. I was surprised by the fact that it had been left unnoticed, like many other stories of the war, and that nobody had worked on the subject. Anyways, a primary research had been conducted by Dr. Mohammad Shahbah. The research was completed during the making of the documentary. And it took over 3 years for us to make the film, as I had to find them one by one. I completed the film and its plot during the time when we made the documentary. There was someone else who was to be the 24th member of the team, whose name was Mr. Saleh Qari. He had been to some extent left out. We found him after realizing he was alive. Then the 23 people went after him. He had been the boys' interpreter during their captivity in Iraq. Later on, the documentary was complete. It was about 13 episodes. After the documentary was aired by IRIB, as I myself work as both a documentary filmmaker and a cinematic filmmaker, and work in both fields, I thought that the story can be dramatized into a movie. But basically, I'm not prolific because I love to do what I love. However, It took some years for me to come up with a desired form for the screenplay. It took several more years for the spell to break, as we filmmakers put it, so that we would make the movie. It took some time before this could happen. Fortunately, this happened this year, and we at POWS Arts and Media Organization managed to make the film. Thankfully, we've received positive feedback so far. I had been looking for an audience beyond our time and our place. I thought that the story is still worth it, both for people today and tomorrow. And it was so attractive that I thought something better would happen to the story in a movie.
One of the points that I want to make about your work is that there's such a vast difference between how we treated the Iraqi POWs and how our POWs were treated in Iraq, that no one in the world really knows about. So I think your project is something that should be shown outside of Iran, because first of all, it's based on documents, and it's a really documentary fiction, a documentary drama production. So I wanted to just emphasize the fact that there is a vast difference between these two, and the way our POWs held themselves, contained themselves, controlled themselves, while, well, there might be exceptions, but in general, how they controlled themselves on the other side, but no one really knows about that. And this is one of the secrets that has to be revealed, and that's why I'm so happy. I watched your film twice in the festival, and both times I saw how the audience cried and was moved. Please, comments.
You referred to an interesting point. Before making the documentary film The 23 People, some 14 years ago, I had done a research casually and had watched movies on how Iranians treated Iraqi POWs during the imposed war. Well, my movie was the opposite. I mean, some of our troops had been taken prisoner. It happens in the territory of the enemy, namely the Ba'athist regime that was ruling Iraq. Such comparisons, intentionally or unintentionally, came about during my interviews with those who had been taken captive and have now grown older. I mean, after returning to Iran, they began to hear about how Iranians had treated Iraqi POWs, and they compared it with the way they had been treated by the Ba'athists at camps inside Iraq. The contrast raised questions, and they asked, how did we treat the Iraqis, as evidence proved? Well, some could suspect that we're making exaggerations about some of our definitions and behaviors during the 8-year war that was in fact waged against us by Iraq. But the reality is that I, as a documentary filmmaker, was surprised, after doing a research, by the way we had treated the Iraqi POWs and how they treated Iranian prisoners. I want to tell you about another feature of this story. If we agree that, I'm not sure of course, if it exists at all, there is a genre named the prison genre, or the genre of the POWs camp. Many movies have been made in this genre in the history of cinema, and there are many good films. In this genre, the protagonist pursues only one goal: how to escape from prison. namely Prison Break. This is still the theme of many new movies or series in the world. Basically, throughout history, a prisoner has to find a way to escape from prison, either through the door or over the wall or make a hole. What makes the 23 people very unique in this genre and among war stories of the world is that, contrary to all other similar stories in the world, the heroes in our story all decide to remain in prison, despite the fact that the doors of the prison are open. The decision has an ideological and cultural basis. I mean, some historical concepts are combined with the elements of drama in order to provide the basis for the decision of the heroes. And this creates an admirable ending in the story for the heroes who make the decision. I think this behavior originates from the civilizational difference that you mentioned. I mean, our civilizational and cultural difference. I should also point to something else. This story is about people who were in 1982 between 15 and 17 years old. They were the righteous representatives of the children of the revolution. I mean, they were the children of the revolution who shortly after the Islamic Revolution went to the front lines and the border to confront the enemy that had entered their soil. In 1982, most notably at the time when Khorramshahr was retaken from the Iraqis after Iran launched a massive operation codenamed Beit al-Muqaddas to recapture the city, Saddam's regime was already contemplating a propaganda campaign. That was because some underage Iranians were at the front line. Though this was not unprecedented, and in other parts of the world, child soldiers also went to war, but not as many as in Iran. Saddam and his aides decided to launch a psychological warfare against Iran, claiming the country was sending child soldiers to the war, and that this was bad and unacceptable, whether under international law or human rights laws. When Saddam and his Ba'ath Party failed in the Battle of Khorramshahr, I mean in the Beit al-Muqaddas operation, and lost what they had occupied and retreated both politically and on the ground, they decided to implement their project at the time. They randomly chose 23 children from among those captured during the Beit al-Muqaddas operation and decided to launch a propaganda show using them. Saddam says, "I will release the children unilaterally so that they will return to their country, as children do not belong in the war." Those who are part of the project gradually realize what they are supposed to be drawn into. That's because from the beginning to the end, they had no arms. They were in the heart of the enemy's territory, and they are surrounded by arms and are under all types of pressures, both psychologically and physically. The turning point is a meeting between them and Saddam, who makes a TV show using the children in which he tries to paint himself as the good guy, and he wants to portray Iran as the one to be blamed. Months after the meeting with Saddam, the children face a dilemma over the unilateral freedom propaganda campaign. If I want to define this project, I should say, thanks to the awareness they had developed about what was happening during the period, and after receiving pieces of information they had received from other POWs who came from Iran, and that how Iran was thinking about the kids, they put up a resistance. They actually begin a soft and cold war with the Iraqis, saying, "We don't want to return to Iran, and if you want to release us, we don't want to be freed." That was a strange decision for the kids themselves, for other POWs, and for Iraq and the Ba'ath Party that sought to free them and press ahead with the propaganda campaign upon their release. And this scenario was successful to some degree, as confirmed by the people I interviewed. I mean, even the meeting with Saddam was sort of meant to cover up the liberation of Khorramshahr. And it was successful in Iraq to some extent. But it was supposed to be successful at the international level. They were waiting for this to happen after the children's release. But that failed. In fact, in the last part of the show, the children say they will not be part of it. And they resist. They brave 8 years of captivity willfully. They stand firmly and do not allow their country and their people's name to be tainted, and they try to save the face of their nation. I mean, they achieved political and ideological maturity during that period, and that is another interesting aspect of the story. In that process, they transformed the concept of childhood. They were kids on their birth certificates and on paper, 13 or 15-year-olds, that is. But they proved to history and their country with their brave action that they were not kids, and that they could be commanders, and that despite all odds, they could work like diplomats in the heart of the enemy's territory.
One of the most interesting aspects of your film was a sequence in which Saddam is meeting these 23 people, and you did not reconstruct the sequence. You did not bring an actor acting Saddam and the kids. You actually inserted that documentary sequence within the film, and it worked perfectly, because there I realized how many of the cast that you had put in the film looked exactly like the real people, and it was a very effective scene because it really happened. There, the audience realizes this really happened, and these are the real people, and I'm hearing a real story. Please.
When we wanted to make the movie, there was a debate, and we faced a challenge as to whether we should recreate the scene or somehow use the real one. I had been working to make the movie for several years, and I deeply believed that I must avoid recreating the scene. I had my own reasons. That was because Saddam, as a historical character, was well known to our contemporary audience and to the future audience. I mean, his pictures and face are well known. I opted for a realistic style to make the story believable, and so that worked out very well. Had I recreated the scene, I would have definitely damaged the other believability aspects of the story, and the spectator who had believed the story until the 50th minute could have ended up disbelieving Saddam. I mean, they could have said to themselves a moment, "Hey, they have recreated Saddam. Look at his mustache and his makeup." And Saddam could have been crushed out of the story. Basically, that was what I was worried about. That scene is completely real. The kids sitting there are mostly real children. I mean, we inserted the kids of our characters using visual techniques. This we did in such a way that nobody in the scene is cut off from the story as you are watching the film. But the Saddam in our story is real. That is a combination of Saddam and our heroes who are sitting before him. The idea was put into practice with much difficulty because I insisted that we do it. But our friends who did the visual work did it properly. Had I not done that, I would have lost a historic opportunity to make such a story and movie. I mean, I had a piece of evidence. That was 16 minutes of Saddam's meeting with the kids. And I had to insert 4 or 4.5 minutes of that film into the movie. But I used the original stuff because of what you referred to. For the audience, most notably the international audience and our future audience, to believe that this is not an imaginary story and that it happened in reality, and so the scene we are talking about is the one they are watching.
Another character in your film is a character called Saleh, who is a translator in the camp, and he is from the Khuzestan area of Iran. We think that he's a spy. And the teenagers, the POWs, think that he's a spy. As the story goes on, we realize that no, he is actually a very strong warrior. He is somebody who has a very interesting history. And at the end, there's a reconciliation and there's a great friendship that develops between the teenagers and Saleh, an elder man, and with a very interesting history. And the very last sequence of the film is all these grown-up POWs who come to the house of Saleh in one of those, I think Khorramshahr it is, and they meet up, and that's how the film ends. The real 23 teenagers who've grown up into older men today go and meet him. It's a very touching sequence. Please explain about this character, how you developed it.
Like I said, the persona of Saleh was mysterious, but very unique. Sometimes Providence arranges something in such a way that makes us suspect someone as being a traitor in subjects such as war. And Saleh is exactly the same person. In the beginning of the war, he is our agent to carry out a mission outside our borders during the war. But he is captured by the Iraqis accidentally. He does not reveal who he is at all. He does not reveal his identity to the end of his captivity. But someone who comes from the same city as Saleh, which is the city of Abadan, and who asked for asylum from Iraq and the Ba'ath Party, and was in fact their agent, came across Saleh and recognized him. And he said to the Iraqis, "The man you have captured is Saleh Qari and works for the Islamic Republic of Iran," and so on and so forth. The Iraqis want to kill him and pressure him to reveal his identity. He survives and works as an interpreter for the POWs. For this reason, any Iranian coming across Saleh is suspicious of him, and at the same time, because he is a revolutionary, he saves the lives of many POWs who were ardent revolutionaries and loved fighting the Iraqis in their own territory. Saleh would calm them down and would help them safely pass through this dangerous place. For the 23 kids, he attends the meeting with Saddam as an interpreter. And the Iraqis did that intentionally, as he was a friend of the kids and could calm the situation at the meeting due to his relationship with the children. They had many interpreters, but they deliberately chose Saleh to control the meeting, and he himself believes they did so intentionally to destroy him. And he was right. He said if the film was released, they knew I could never return to Iran, and there was no way I could do so, and that I had to seek asylum. He said I didn't do this, and did all I could to return to Iran, despite the fact that I knew upon my return I would be accused of treason because I was an interpreter at the meeting with Saddam. He accepted the risk, and he suffered a blow because they would be suspicious of anyone else in terms of security, and they would be interrogated and put in jail. But Saleh, as we and other friends in touch with him have concluded, is such a good and pure man, and what he has done was for God's sake and for the good of his country, that he has never been afraid of death or of being framed. The late Mr. Hujjatul Islam Abu Turabi, who was known as the spiritual father of the POWs, and all people trusted him in captivity, knew Saleh Qari very well and was in touch with him and knew who he was and what he was doing, but Abu Turabi did not tell anyone. When they returned to Iran, Mr. Abu Turabi testified that Saleh was not the man they thought he was. He said Saleh did not betray Iran, rather he was a national hero, and he did not reveal any of the secrets he knew about to the Iraqis during captivity. When it was proved later that none of those secrets had been revealed, Saleh Qari is acquitted and returns to his home. But all this tarnished his image among the people of his city. The court acquitted him, but he couldn't live in town comfortably. Many years passed, and then we, along with the 23 people, went to his house with the documentary film. And in the film, the boys explained Mr. Saleh Qari's character and proved who he was with evidence in such a way that after the 23 people testified, the people in his city realized what an important person Saleh was, and that he was not a traitor, and was in fact a hero, a national hero.
I thank you very much, Mr. Jafari, for the interview. One of the most strong sequences was this sequences that related to this gentleman that you so rightly proved that he was indeed a hero. But the people have to see the film to understand exactly what I'm talking about. This is one of the films that should be exported out of Iran to reveal what the real culture, the civilization of this nation is, despite all the demonization or the false charges against Iran. I wish you success in your next project, and thank you for taking your time and giving us this opportunity. And so that does it for this edition of The Secret. I'm Nadir Talibzadeh. See you next time.